Hello and welcome. Coming up on Network Africa today. South Africa-U.S. trade accusations following detentions of officials as Washington threatens severe consequences. UN Sudan's RSF paramilitary force killed 1,000 civilians in Zanzam refugee camp in the month of April. Plus, United Nations says the broad consultations and transparency needed in West Africa in light of recent failed coup in Benin Republic. Once again, welcome to Network Africa. Tensions are rising between South Africa and the United States over the detention of officials as the South African government has dismissed U.S. accusations that it harassed and intimidated American personnel during a raid on a center processing refugee applications by white South Africans seeking asylum in the United States. This disagreement stems from a raid conducted on Tuesday during the South African authorities expelled 7 Kenyan nationals for working illegally in the country. Well, South Africa has accused the United States of employing Kenyan nationals without valid work permits at the facility handling the refugee applications. But the United States has now accused South Africa of publishing the passport details of its officials, describing that move as unacceptable and warning of severe consequences. Washington also has accused South Africa of interfering in its own effort to admit white Afrikaners as refugees. And South Africa has denied these allegations, saying that treat matters of data security with utmost seriousness. And U.S. has now offered asylum status to Afrikaners, claiming the community faces persecution. South Africa's government has rejected those claims. But earlier this week, the Trump administration announced the extension of its travel ban on 5 additional countries from entering into the United States. But full entry restrictions had to be imposed on people from Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, South Sudan, and Syria, as well as Palestinian Authority passport holders. But Laos and Sierra Leone, which were previously subject to the partial restriction, have now been moved to the full ban list, while Nigeria, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe, as well as 12 other countries, have been placed on partial restrictions. The bans are coming into effect on January the 1st, 2026, and it's according to the White House. These restrictions are intended to protect the security of the United States. And for more details, our Washington correspondent had a chat with U.S. Congressman Jonathan Jackson. Take a listen.
Congressman Jackson, thank you again for joining us. We know that we are in very interesting times, especially as it relates to international relations for the U.S. And across the globe. But specifically today, I want to spend some time talking about the partial travel ban for Nigeria in the United States. Tell us, what does this really mean? People are still wondering, do I go home for the holiday? Am I going to get back into the U.S.? What does this actually mean for those Nigerians who want to travel back home?
I would say if you absolutely do not have to go back and you absolutely have compelling business interest here, to please stay. These travel bans have gone into effect without the oversight of Congress. There's been no oversight. This is unprecedented territory. I've seen people go to other countries in Asia and South America where they could not re-enter the United States. And so what the president doing, President Trump, is sending out a chilling effect all across the world. And he is raising barriers, not reducing barriers. He's raising tariffs, not reducing barriers. These are almost like implicit acts of war that he is creating hostility amongst allies, and he is becoming very adversarial. So I think this is a pattern that he's showing, even in the threats that he's made to northern Nigeria. We know the issues of the Christianity being under attack, and Nigeria is not accurate. We know that Christians and Muslims have gotten along for years, and President Tinubu is a Muslim married to a Christian, and we do recognize the ethnic lines. that this tension is relying upon. And so what we're looking forward to is getting the House back so we can normalize relationships. Nigerians are America's friends and need to be respected as such.
You know, you mentioned something very key and critical. This was done without congressional oversight. How is Congress responding to this partial travel ban?
Well, this is now in the leadership of the Republican-led Congress. So one of the things that we can do or should hear about are multinational organizations, corporations that benefit and profit enormously off of their trade relationship with Nigeria. They should speak up. This is bad for business. This is bad for civil discourse. And currently, until we take back over the leadership of the House, this is the rules that he's applying. And he's conducting foreign policy without a plan. And I would hate to think, as I thought of the other day in the hearing on Western Hemisphere, when we were telling the president he cannot go into Venezuela and he must break down the Armada, is that he cited the Monroe Doctrine. And he said he wanted our oil back, as if he owns Venezuela, as if he's going to take another country's sovereignty away. So it's just not Nigeria. This is what he's doing. It's almost he's in fits of rage. And so we're doing our best. So let me apologize. The President of the United States was wrong for threatening the Nigerian people. And we're going to do all we can to accelerate bringing our relations back together and on track. They've always been positive, and we want to make them even better.
Let's head to the north region of Africa now, where Sudan's top general Abdel Fattah Burhan has met with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in Cairo as international pressure grows to resolve the war in Sudan. The meeting is coming after General Burhan held talks with the Saudi officials in Riyadh earlier this week as efforts intensify to push for a political solution. And in a statement after the Cairo talks, the Egyptian presidency reaffirmed its support for Sudan while warning against the creation or the recognition of any parallel governing authorities. The statement also confirms that Egypt has reserved the right to take all necessary measures under international law and existing defense agreements to ensure territorial integrity. Meanwhile, a UN report says that the paramilitary rapid support forces, the RSF, had killed at least 1,000 civilians during a 3-day attack on the Zamzam refugee camp in Sudan's Darfur region last April. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, adds that at least 104 people, including women and children, most of them from the Zahawa ethnic group, were subjected to gruesome sexual violence, including rape and gang rape and sexual slavery. The human rights chief calls for all states, particularly those with influence on the situation, to do all in their power to prevent atrocities and lend their collective support to diplomatic efforts towards a ceasefire and durable resolution to that conflict.
Report details killings, rape and torture and other violations that were committed during the 3-day offensive on the Zamzam IDP camp by the Rapid Support Forces in April this year. Over 1,000 civilians were killed, 319 of them summarily executed, some in their homes and others in the main market, in schools, health facilities and mosques. And more than 400,000 people were displaced once again. Such deliberate killing of civilians or persons hors de combat may constitute the war crime of murder. There must be an impartial, thorough and effective investigation into the attack on the camp, and those responsible for serious violations of international law must be punished. At least 104 people, including 75 women, 26 girls and 3 boys, most of them from the Zagawa ethnic tribe, were subjected to gruesome sexual violence, including rape and gang rape and sexual slavery. Sexual violence appears to have been deliberately used to inflict terror on the community. These horrific patterns of violations committed with impunity are consistent with what my office has repeatedly documented, including during the RSF takeover of al-Fashir in October. The world must not sit back and watch as such cruelty becomes entrenched as the order of the day in Sudan. All states, particularly those with influence, must do all in their power to prevent atrocities and lend their collective support to diplomatic efforts towards a ceasefire and a durable resolution of the conflict.
We told you earlier about the tension rising between South Africa and the United States over the detention of officials after a raid on a center processing refugee camp applications by white South Africans seeking asylum in the U.S. Let's now bring in Innocent Semosa, is joining us from Johannesburg, our South African correspondent. Thank you very much, Innocent, for joining us on Network Africa.
Good evening to you and our viewers. It's good to be with you.
It's good to be with you too. Now, what happened at the U.S.-linked refugee processing center in Johannesburg, and why has it caused such a diplomatic stir?
Yeah, indeed. And in fact, you and I can agree that the relationship between South Africa and the United States continues to deteriorate. Here we're hearing that it's from an intelligence that they intercepted that there were 7 Kenyan nationals who were actually working to process Afrikaners who wants to go to the United States. So therefore, we are hearing news that allegedly those people are undocumented. They came to the country. Well, they got a tourism visa. However, they didn't get a work visa in the country. So therefore, they're not allowed to basically do what they're doing. So hence, we're seeing the Home Affairs officials, they're intercepting with the intelligence to really find out what led to this and why is that these people are working without working visas. So that's where we find ourselves today. And I guess many people are saying that South Africa is a sovereign state and they are well in their rights to basically make sure that all the people who are contributing to the economy of the country, they are accounted for. So right now, I can tell you now that it does seem as though whatever South Africa does, it continues to deteriorate the relationship between Pretoria and Washington. And
all right, but South African authorities are saying the workers arrested were in the country illegally. As you said, from a legal standpoint this time, was the raid justified under South African migration law?
Indeed, I think it was justified, as I indicated, because you as a country, you would need to know how many people are indeed contributing to the GDP of the country. If or else, if those people were to found wanting or they were to commit crime, they will be accounted for. We'll know these people. So therefore, South Africa is in its right to basically want to know how are you operating without your work permits, because it's indeed not allowed in South Africa. So it's within the law, it's within the parameters of the law to really make sure that people who are working or who are foreign nationals and working have necessary document to basically contribute in whatever field. And
well, on the U.S. part, it is saying that its refugee operations were interfered with. But how serious is this dispute, and could it further strain U.S.-South Africa relations, knowing what is already on ground at the moment?
No doubt it will indeed continue. And again, and the challenge here is that the America have 3 embassies in South Africa. There's a consulate in Johannesburg, here in Sandton. There is the embassy in Pretoria, and there's also offices in Cape Town. So the issues around genocide really they puzzle a lot of people's minds, because we've got Afrikaners who are here in the country who are saying that there is no genocide. And a lot of people are trying, if these workers at these embassies are failing to tell President Donald Trump that there is no genocide in the country, or if he's ignoring them, it's pretty much a problem. And again, going back to your question, this will continue by far to exacerbate the situation because of this so-called genocide. And we do know that there is indeed no genocide in the country. And again, the people who are here, they're saying that there's no genocide. In fact, just seeing that the rand over the past weeks, it was really doing very well. I mean, 16 rand. We've not seen that in a long time. And we're seeing American businesses really coming to South Africa wanting to invest. Or questions are, if there is indeed genocide, why are these American businesses coming to invest in South Africa? So it does seem as though someone is not telling the truth. And I don't know whether or not it is the people who are advising President Donald Trump or his administration as a whole. But I can tell you now that on the ground, people are confirming that there is indeed no genocide in South Africa. But again, going back to your question, this will indeed continue to exacerbate the situation.
And finally, before we wrap up, this center was actually processing refugee claims largely from white South Africans. Why is that aspect so controversial inside South Africa?
It is so controversial, and because of the issues around this genocide that I just alluded to, it is pretty much like that because we're seeing lots of people coming up. If there was a situation like that, and we would see people going to social media, we would see people saying that there is indeed genocide in South Africa, but the South African government here, they're saying that these people who are processing these documents, they should have work visas. So that's why the South African government and the Home Affairs saying that these people are illegal. What they're doing is not accepted. So what they're doing it can be justified. But that's where we find ourselves. But the big question here, and before I bring it back to you, is whether or not this relationship between Pretoria and Washington, is it strained forever? Will it be mended? Will the new administration after President Donald Trump mend the relationship? Because it's really deteriorating and it's not good. But again, the South African government has made it clear that they'll continue to engage with their American counterparts because they believe that America is indeed a strategic partner of the South African economy. So they said they'll continue to engage with them, but it does seem as though at the moment things are not looking right. South Africa just missed one of the G20 meetings and they're not invited to the G20 next year. So one could see that things are really not looking good, but we trust that this relationship will be mended.
All right, Innocent, just quickly let's wrap this up. Looking ahead, what happens now to the arrested workers, refugee applicants, and even the wider relationship between Pretoria and Washington going forward?
Well, for now, we've not heard from Home Affairs or the South African Police Services as to what's going to happen to the people who are arrested, because we do know now, and that investigations are still continuing. So I guess because it's a very much delicate situation where it involves America, it involves their counterparts, so they don't want to really open it up to the public, I guess, for now. But we know now that the investigations are continuing. As soon as we have information, we'll be able to share with our viewers. And
all right. Thank you very much. South Africa correspondent Innocent Samosa, thanks for your time on Network Africa.
Thank you, colleague.
United Nations has warned that the December 7 attempted coup in Benin Republic should be seen as a wake-up call for institutional reform in West Africa and the Sahel region, also underscoring the need for broad consultation and transparency in constitutional and governance reform processes in Benin, ahead of its presidential and legislative elections scheduled for early 2026. While briefing the Security Council via video link, Deputy Special Representative for West Africa and the Sahel, Barry Freeman, highlighted key developments that illustrate both the region's fragility and its resilience. She also says that experience across the region shows that governance reforms perceived as exclusionary erode legitimacy and fuel popular discontent, urging the Council to support ECOWAS efforts to restore constitutional order in Guinea-Bissau and, more broadly, protect the region's democratic gains.
Experience across the region shows that governance reforms perceived as exclusionary erode legitimacy and fuel popular discontent. The 7 December coup attempt in Benin, so close to presidential and legislative elections scheduled for early 2026, further underscores the need for broad consultation and transparency on constitutional and governance reform processes. Concrete steps are advancing to operationalize the ECOWAS Regional Counterterrorism Force, despite earlier delays caused by resource gaps. I urge member states to consider predictable financing for the Sahel under Security Council Resolution 2719. To operationalize this resolution, leaders of the region must develop a unified plan that includes a concept of operations. UNOWAS intends to work with partners, including the AU and ECOWAS, to build momentum towards this end.
We welcome UNOWA's progress on the climate, peace and security agenda, in close collaboration with regional and international partners. We commend the dedicated work of the Climate, Peace and Security Advisor. We value recent engagements on farmer pastoralist dynamics, transboundary protected areas, climate, peace and security assessments, and joint analysis on maritime and climate security. In line with its mandate, UNOWAS should continue supporting the region and its countries to address the root causes of insecurity, including through activities like the Interministerial Dialogue on Climate, Peace and Security planned for 2026.
In a bid to identify, incubate and scale solutions across the diverse sets of sectors, Young Africa Innovates in partnership with United Nations Development Programme and MasterCard Foundation spotlights young innovators in Nigeria. The organizers say the initiative targets youth, women and persons with disabilities, empowering them to design real solutions for real challenges.
Energy and excitement fill the hall as young minds from across Nigeria are set for Young Africa Innovates Showcase. In collaboration with the United Nations Development Programme, that's the UNDP, and MasterCard Foundation, Young Africa Innovates celebrates creativity, resilience and solutions shaping Nigeria's future. From 9,300 applicants, only 205 innovators complete the intensive 4-month incubation across 7 states. A partner, the UNDP, believes that the incubation period will train participants for community-driven problem solving.
We are not just showcasing solutions. We are really showcasing what is possible. A number of you are really coming together to address some of the most complex development challenges of all times. With strong courage, with strong creativity, with determination, you are moving the agenda forward.
Another partner, MasterCard Foundation, brings attention to, among others, persons living with disabilities.
When it comes to a lot of innovation, what we call atypical actors, so persons with disabilities, persons from rural communities, are completely ignored. So this program was really to target those specific groups of people because we know that great ideas can be found anywhere.
The pitch showcase takes center stage as innovators present solutions in technology, creative industries, grassroots development, health, and a whole lot more.
We are solving the problem of financial exclusion to the people at the bottom of the pyramid. Everything about YAI is up us shaping, our products to see that it's not just about us, but about the people we are targeting.
A panel session follows, stressing the need for stronger public-private collaboration, digital education, and inclusive policies.
We're part of this movement, so we need to also focus on collaboration, have intentional engagement to make sure that we are bringing young people part of the decision-making process. So they have to be stakeholders.
The innovation exhibition highlights inspiring products and prototypes that have been developed.
Persevere. I remember when I was young, I became a professional nuisance when I wanted to get things done. It's always going to be challenges anywhere and everywhere where you go. But it's your persistence, your resilience, and your belief and confidence, not only in yourself, but also in our beloved nation, Nigeria.
Certificates are awarded as Young Africa Innovates says innovation isn't just about technology. but solving real problems. And so they seek to identify, incubate, and scale youth-led solutions that drive social economy.
And did you know that Africa's coldest city in Morocco is setting its first big show of the winter? Known as the Switzerland of Morocco, it can reach 23.9 degrees Celsius. Morocco's weather service warned of heavy snow with 10 to 50 centimeter expected and more in higher areas. The snow may continue through the week with several inches already reported or forecast already. Well, if you didn't know, you know now. And that's it on Network Africa for this week. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawodo. Have a wonderful weekend.